Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Always an Expat, a podcast dedicated to elevating expat stories, brought to you by fellow expat, yours truly, Richard Taylor and Plan First Wealth. My guest today is Angus Mcnab. Angus is many things. He is the founder and CEO of Mcnab Sports Consulting based in New York City, and he is the CEO and GM of York United FC in Toronto. Originally from Scotland, but schooled in Essex, Angus represented Scottish students in rugby league and Scottish University's rugby union. He was also involved in coaching the Scottish Rugby League national team and Scotland students. And this is all before he married an American, came to the States, and has done all sorts of impressive things here. So, suffice to say, this is going to be a good one. But before we get into it, I just need to read a short disclaimer. Always an Expat is affiliated with Plan First Wealth LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of Plan First Wealth. Information presented is for educational purposes only. So, without further ado, let's get straight into it. Hi Angus, welcome to Always an Expat.
Thanks very much, Rich. Good to have a chat.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So, there's a lot there. I mean, I wasn't kidding. You did a lot early on. So, I mean, tell us your story. Tell us how we got here, but start from the beginning. Like, there's a lot. I mean, I'm keen to hear.
Yeah, it's. I think you covered most of the bases there. In that, was born in Edinburgh. Dad used to work for Royal Bank of Scotland. Was actually one of these absolute anomalies now in that he pretty much worked his entire career at the bank, joining at 15, 16 at school and progressing through the ladder from branch banking and things there all the way to working in the corporate relationship side of the business down in London. I moved down to London and to Billericay in Essex when I was 3 years old.
From
went to
Edinburgh
school down there. Yeah, and then went back at 18 to university at Heriot had a great decade or so back up in Scotland at university and then staying on afterwards. And then various things have then led on to coming out to New York and coming out to the States and somewhere that is absolutely home now. And yeah, country that I love living in and somewhere that I really enjoy.
Edinburgh, Billericay, Edinburgh, New York City. That's
bit of a stop off back in there. Bit of a stop off back in London there just immediately before coming to New York for a couple of years. And I think that probably prepared me for New York, is going back to London for a little bit, because I think Edinburgh and New York could be a fair old change of pace. But no, it's great and love living and working here now across in the US.
Edinburgh is a great city, isn't it? But it's very different to New York and London. It's just so much smaller, but it's a great city.
Yeah, I absolutely love the place. Still so many great friends there. Such a great time there. I think the decision for me to move and head down to London was probably made a lot easier by people in the UK. I would say settling down, getting married, having kids a little bit younger. It tends to happen in New York and things like that. I wasn't at that stage in my life by any way, shape or form. So heading back down to London, then heading out to New York, it's sort of timing for me seemed to gel a lot better with the pace of life that there was here in the States and just where I was in my own life personally.
This hasn't come up on the podcast before, but I've also anecdotally experienced that. People in the UK maybe it's not just the UK, maybe it's just not the major cities, but people settle down a bit earlier outside of them. 20s, I'd say maybe, whereas New York, and I have not worked in London, but maybe you'll tell me London is the same. It's much more in the 30s.
Yeah, I'd say, and that definitely that's my experience in New York, for sure. I think people come here, and maybe it is that piece of the American dream that people come here to make their careers and are very focused on work when they get here, and they jump right into it. So, and I think anecdotally, friends of mine in other industries tend to work much longer hours when they get here, particularly banking, finance, etc., etc. Juniors, when they arrive in the city, it's like 14-hour days are the norm. And then sometimes you'll meet them for a beer and they go back to the office, which always astounded me.
Yeah.
But it's just very different. But no, I think that's probably a fair characterization that certainly New York people do tend to settle a bit later. And even now with kids and things like that, I would say there's a lot more people my own age and even older in terms of with kids and things rather than sort of the UK and people early 20s having kids.
New York is all business, isn't it? I mean, it's almost like a cliche, but it is. It's just all business all the time.
It's always on, and I think that's what I loved about it. I think initially when I moved here, I lived Upper West Side, and it was fantastic to live in it and live in Manhattan. And then after 3 years, Upper West Side, moved across to Brooklyn, and a little bit slower, and just that almost relief on a Friday night to jump off the island. And then the next stage of my life as well, now splitting my time between Brooklyn and place that we have out on Long Island, you do get that bit. I suppose it's like in London as well, where we move out to the suburbs a little bit, or there is that sort of little bit of creep out of the madness as you have kids. And I hate to say grow up, but as life changes.
Yeah, we were on the Upper East Side, and there was just something great being part of the city. We hardly ever left the island. I mean, it's remarkable, really, how infrequently we left it. But I remember once we were in Weehawken at someone's house. It was at the weekend. We'd gone over to Weehawken, and we were on their deck. They're in an apartment building, looking back at the city, and it's so cool looking at the city from when you're in Brooklyn or Dumbo or somewhere, or Weehawken on the other side, and you look back at the southern tip of New York. It's kind of breathtaking, and the size of it, and it really is. It never gets old. You never get bored of it. But I was with a guy. He worked in the city. I think he's a CFA now, and he was saying on Friday night, the city just empties, and he gets the train, and he'll sit out on this deck having a beer, looking back at the city, and it's like you feel like the city is throbbing as it just disgorges everyone, and it always stuck with me that image, that metaphor. As being very apt. The city during the working week, it really does it just pulsates. I don't know anyone else like it.
No, I don't either. Other than sort of you go to your major financial hubs around the world, I think it is something unique to London, to New York, to across in Asia, to Tokyo, to these major hubs that. There is something unique about the place. There is a buzz. There is a way of life. There is a pace to life that I think is pretty remarkable. And I think when I first came here, the pace of New York life was quite surprising. And the difference in it just really being, I suppose, set up to work, if you know what I mean, in terms of everything is always on and always for you. And I think that's because people have just such hectic professional lives that when they want to do things, when they need things even, and this is almost I don't know whether it was during or post-pandemic world of Amazon Prime everything, but New York's always felt that always on. There's always something able to be delivered, whether that was for me when I first came across in 2010, just weird things like your building would take your dry cleaning in and it would be delivered back to your building and things like that seem so small, so minor, and dormant buildings even. And
as a Brit, you think that's such an extravagant, unnecessary frivolous, and then you have one, you're like, I'm never going back.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's very strange, and all of that. All of these things that are built into your life to help it, that I think are obviously probably very commonplace in the UK now. But to me, it seemed such an anomaly when I first came across. But yeah, very, very different. But yeah, absolutely love the place now and love all of my various American comforts and things that come with it. You settled into life pretty normally over here.
Do you think that pace sets you up for burnout, or do you think it attracts people who thrive on that and don't burn out?
I don't know. In terms of for me, I was probably on a very similar trajectory in the UK with what I was doing work-wise, working within sport, but working on the commercial side of sport. You're in the office Monday to Friday, but then you're at matches, you're at events on the weekend, and so the hybrid piece that I was doing in the UK primarily focused around rugby at the time. I would be in the office working with clients when I was with Opta. Then on the weekends, I would be in a broadcast truck with the BBC at the Six Nations and doing 2 games in the Six Nations on a weekend. So it was normal for me to be Monday to Friday in the office, Friday evening or Friday lunchtime, then set off to wherever the first game of the doubleheader was for the weekend. So whether it's you're hopping on a train in central London to get out to Cardiff, or you sort of head into the airport to go to Rome, Dublin, Edinburgh, etc., for the first one, and then immediately after the first game of the weekend, you're then to an airport or to wherever else to go to the second one, and then you're back in on a Monday. Like I was used to that sort of cadence of things anyway, and I think that set me up. Yeah, it was hard work, but it was
just listening to that. I'm tired.
It was brilliant for me at the time. I mean, my now wife was across here in the States. We were doing the long distance thing, so it gave me the opportunity to really jump into something career-wise for me, and it was something that I loved. Like, I'm very fortunate that I get to work in sport. I very much understand that sport is one of these unique industries that it's never really yours. You're a custodian of things because there are so many other people that care about what happens, and the 2 teams that are on the field, the individuals that are playing, etc., that you're a very small part of the machine, but it's an incredible place and industry to work in because it just evokes such passion in people. So, and I have that same passion as a fan. So you're able to make an impact, and whether it was you would help On Air Talent produce a piece of analysis as a result of the data or whatever else, you could very tangibly see what you were doing and the impact of it on a broadcast. Or if you're working with a team and doing the consulting side of it on the data analytics side, if you can see them progressing and winning, that was a lot of fun as well. So I think for me, I've just been very, very lucky that I work in a field that, frankly, I'm obsessed with. You have your highs, you have your lows, but I think the burnout piece and things like that is real, but it's the same as anything. If you want to be very good at something, you're gonna encounter a fair bit of pressure.
The rule of thirds. If you're really going for something, it should feel good a third of the time, ambivalent a third of the time, and bad a third of the time, even if you really love it. That was a piece of advice the coach gave to Alexi Papis, the American runner, the rule of thirds. If you're really going for something, and if it doesn't feel really bad a third of the time, you're not pushing yourself hard enough, which I thought was interesting. I imagine working in a field like sport, though, that passion that many people have for it can be a blessing, but sometimes it can be a curse.
100% it's a curse. 100% it's a curse because people close to you don't necessarily get it. Like my wife, certainly, the number of arguments we've had over various things like, do I need to do something for work, or am I doing it because I enjoy it? And things there, and how that spills over into your family life and the balance of things there. Luckily, I've got 2 boys now, and my eldest, Cameron, he's 6.5, and he's firmly on my side when it comes to the TV channels and what's going on. And he is possibly right now, with like watching and running the club up at York, he's worse than me watching a game in terms of the roller coaster of emotion and the anger at everything from referees to opposition players to fans in stands. It's quite funny watching him now, and actually it's just feels amazing that the opportunities that I've had in sport to see him sort of jumping into it, one on a playing side of it. There's nothing better than, and I think I had one of my best moments ever in like working in sport in football this year when I was away with the team. We played an away match, local derby against Forge FC in Hamilton. We won the game with a 93rd minute goal from 35, 40 yards. And then you get back home to the family, and then you've got your 6.5-year-old son try to recreate the goal in the back garden. Like that's pretty special and a pretty awesome moment. So it's amazing for me now that I get to share that, and but also, like you say, with that comes a lot of things that put additional pressure, additional stress on relationships and things around you, because you are completely zoned in on things, and you become slightly myopic, and like the desire to win and to chase something is always there. And I think that's a trait of many successful people, is the desire for balance and achieving balance. I'm not sure you necessarily can always win on that, and things are truly balanced. There's going to be highs and there's going to be lows, and there's going to be times where you have to give more, and there are times that ultimately means that you're going to have to give less in a few other areas, and it's finding where and when to dial back on that is the tricky bit for sure.
Yeah, that's an open question, that one. A lot of people now are rejecting this idea of balance and just saying, go for it. And they're not saying go for it at the expense of your family and other stuff. They're just saying balance might not be for everyone. For you, it might be 80-20, and accept that and work with it.
And I think it's with that question on balance, it's the outcome, it's the reward. So does the reward warrant the sacrifice and the demands you put on others around you, the demands you put on yourself? And it's not a question of balance for me. I think it's something I struggle with at times, is that like, does the outcome warrant what you're doing? And that's not just family, that's just where you drive your attention, where you drive your focus. And in some way, are you, as a result of your focus, are you still staying true to what you believe in? Are you still staying true to a system of fairness, or this, that, the other, that is critical to you? And that's a challenge, because we all like to win. And 90% of the time, when you win, there might be someone else that loses. And so it's trying to find those situations and find the sort of the outcome in it all, that you're as close to everyone winning as possible.
Which is not possible, is it?
It's not
but then
always,
also,
no.
I guess you're teaching your kids about losing. That's a part of life. I don't mean, losing is a part of life. A daily life.
Absolutely. And that's not hard. Like in terms of that, well, that shouldn't be hard in terms of like as a concept, but it is in terms of some things that you go up against and some things that you face. You got to balance that. You got to try and educate them. You got to try and say to them that like it's okay that we didn't win today. We get another chance 7 days time, but eventually those chances do run out. And then that's where it does get harder, and it gets more challenging. But it's not easy. And again, all of these elements and things just very different. I would say necessarily different in how I grew up in the UK versus how my kids are growing up in America. I just think there are certainly some differences now I don't mean different in the UK now to different in America now. I think probably there are the generational differences in parenting, in kids sport, winning, losing, participation, and I think that's probably the distinction I see it in sport, the distinction between effort and participation. For me, turning up's not enough. It's effort. Turning up is the first step in things. But it's then, once you're there, well, what are you doing? Are you committing to something? Are you doing it? And working through it all.
So we have with the 4-year-old, he's doing a lot of new stuff and he's developing and growing, and we find ourselves praising him for doing stuff. Oh, you're fantastic at that. You're great at that. Well done, aren't you? Wonderful. And that's not right. I mean, obviously that's better than not praising them. But what we're really trying to program ourselves to do is programming him for effort.
Yeah.
So we're constantly saying, you're getting much better at that. I love the fact that you're trying so hard. I keep telling him my favourite thing about him is that he keeps trying, he tries harder. When he falls down, he gets up, and it's all about praising the effort and the commitment. You're right, I never actually thought of it from it's a bit of a flashpoint, isn't it, this whole participation trophy. But, and I'm very much at the point where, obviously winning is the objective, but I do believe in everyone who tries. I'd never thought of it like that, but everyone who puts in effort, rewarding the effort, not necessarily just winning, but also not necessarily not just showing up, trying. That it's all about trying.
And it's hard as well. I mean, like there's, I laugh as well at my wife. She laughs at me at it. It's caused like discussions, arguments at various times, and like there are so many things in terms of it's part of, I would say, the cultural differences and things in the US and the UK, like in how kids are brought up in terms of like, and very different in big cities, rural areas, what you can expose your kids to. And that in New York, I think, is one of the greatest things, in that so many things that kids can be exposed to, can experience from such a young age, so many fantastic opportunities for them, that my life here ultimately and our life here ultimately grants them. But there are some differences and things, be it school system and education, be it all of these aspects, be it these, and it's one of these big gripes of mine, a lot of these, like, I don't think they're designed to be parent shamers on Instagram, in terms of like, well, no, actually, speak to your children this way, speak to your children that way, do the other. It's just an interesting balance, all of it, and the UK mentality of it, the mentality of someone who was brought up by, I don't know, whether it's boomer parents and things, in terms of who
Same,
like there, but it's just very, very different in terms of everyone's experiences of parenting, of family, of all of these things, and like. I just think it's not that I object egregiously to these people who are this, that, the other on Instagram and things there. But my own personal experience, like being a dad first time round, I found it really hard, in terms of, because I was never that bloke who like, oh, someone's had a baby, do you want to hold it? Well, no, why? What does it do for me? Like this object's going to sit there. It might shit itself. It might puke on me. Like, what do I want it for? Like, just have it back. Like, this is going to add nothing to my life.
You've got a dog. Oh, now your dog. I'm interested in your dog. Yeah, no, give me your dog.
Yeah.
You keep your kid. No, I've got no interest in your.
The dog will give me something back initially. Bring this back when it's 6. When it's got a trick. Like, this is great. But like, I never got that. I was never that bloke in terms of like, give us your kid, give us your baby, whatever else. So unfortunately for Cam, he's probably really messed up, because I probably got so many things wrong. Didn't drop him in terms of a few years of rugby, meant I had a decent pair of hands, so we were fine on that front. But like, it's just these things growing up is very different, and experiencing that, the dynamics, and as much as you know someone, I don't think you truly know them until you have kids, and like you have like those dark moments when they won't sleep in the middle of the night, and my wife's like just supremely organised, a brilliant researcher, and it's like getting woken up at the middle of the night. What do you think we should do? And I'll never forget one evening I said, well, I'm pretty sure you've been up for the last 2.5 hours reading every article on Google, so why don't you just tell me, and then we'll go from there, because I have no concept whatsoever what we might need to do with this small person that could or couldn't need me right now. So it was just very, very different for me. And I think navigating that side of it and the difference of like relationships between people who've grown up in the UK, grown up here. Although we both speak English, although my wife will argue that I don't sometimes, and I will argue that she doesn't sometimes. But yeah, very, very different existences, and all of that is a lot of fun ultimately. And I think hopefully you bring the best bits from you both, and you go from there.
What you just said has resonated with me so hard. So I was also just no interest in kids whatsoever. And I used to joke, because there's no kids in my family either. I'm from quite a small family. There's no small children. I used to joke that I'd like stick my hand out to shake a 2-year-old's hand. Like, I've just got no idea how to interact with them at all. And I was nervous with my own kids. I didn't know what it was going to be like. And that first year is just hard. It's hard. They're just a lump. Screaming lump, and I struggled. And Sam, I'm nervous to share all this, so you might have to be prepared to cut it all out. But I'll admit here, my wife has since told me there was a while where she was like, "Oh, should we have done this?" Like, he's just not that engaged. He's just not, and it's hard. And I don't suffer in silence. Let's put it that way. I share my pain with the world. And my wife was like, what is this right? And now she tells me this now, because since then, as Roman has got older, and I'm just like dived into it, and I love it. It's still really hard, but I've also got to be grateful for the pandemic, because that forced me to be at home, and I was there for his first words, his first steps, and I realised just how magic it all is. And it's been totally different ever since. And I make all sorts of mistakes. I'm sure in some ways I'm not a great dad, but I try to be a great dad. And that's half the battle, just trying and showing up. And we've just gone through it with another 1-year-old, and a lot of those same frustrations and shortcomings, I should say, surfaced. But what you just said really resonated.
The second one I actually feel for, because like the first one I feel for because I sort of almost held it at arm's length, not sure what it's going to do or how it might kick back at me or do this, do that. The other one, in terms of like, so different in terms of like mood, disposition, how much more relaxed you are with it, in that you realize I really can't bugger this up too much. Like, I can't break it. And like, because you sort of realize with the first one, it's like, well, I can't send this back to Amazon and they'll fix it and get me another one or whatever else. But like the second one, you're like, well, that one's not too messed up. That one's all right. I've not damaged it completely just yet. They'll probably tell me when I'm older and they're 20 that I really did.
But you know what? Just being receptive to that is something. Just being open to like, yeah, I didn't get it right, and I just tell me what went wrong. I'll apologize and I'll try harder. That's just being open to that is something I think that separates us generationally from previous generations. Yeah,
massively. I think, and it's just very different in terms of, and I think it's just been great. It's been so different in terms of, and it's been so different having kids than you ever expect or you ever know, and you don't know until you're in the midst of it. But it's been awesome, and the boys are absolutely everything, and the second one's going to be a handful. You can see that already.
Yeah,
but it's fun in terms of, and that's why you do. Well, whatever it is you do, in terms of, I think they've probably brought, not necessarily, again, I don't think it's balanced. They've brought focus in terms of why you do things, why you'd like to succeed, and sort of objectively them see you be successful in whatever your chosen field is. Mine is obviously sport, but I like sort of that. And in a weird way, it doesn't always happen, but again, with right now running a club and having like the pinnacle of the week ultimately being a win or loss moment, it is good learning, and it's good for them.
I never thought of it like that. I don't know what. Yeah. When your professional career is largely focused around a sports club that plays weekly, it culminates in a win or a loss, or occasionally a draw, I guess. Wow, yeah, never.
The mood on a Monday morning is governed by what
No
happens
way,
on
really?
Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, it has to be in terms of like, because
Right.
yeah, the entire organisation is geared up like for the ticketing team. Wins mean more ticket sales. For the merchandise team, that means special offers that it's free naming, numbering on a jersey for whoever scored a goal on a Friday, or on a Saturday or Sunday. It all is so interwoven in that you can be a sports organisation of 25, 30 people across the enterprise at our level in terms of full-time and support staff that are outside of the playing squad and the coaching staff. And then you can be something as big as an NFL, an NBA team, into organizations, into the hundreds of people. The mood of the organization, particularly in something like the NFL, when it's a like 13, 15-week season, it's what happens on Sunday and Monday, on Monday night, Thursday night now as well. But it's what happens on that weekly event really dictates the mood of the organization and the players, the coaching staff, you as ultimately the person that people report into. You bear a lot of the weight of that. It's that big challenge because it's not just your organization. There's probably a lot of organizations as well that depend on the mood of someone on a Monday morning if their team's had a great result on the weekend.
Wow, I never really thought of it like that. How truly all encompassing it is. I mean, I assumed it was all encompassing, but there's extra facets of it I've never really considered. Do you think it's possible to be successful working in sport if you're not into sport? And I ask that so like either that obsession can be a superpower because you have to be engaged, you have to work all day, then go to the night matches or the weekend matches, right? And then it's either a superpower, or is not being a sports person can a degree of objectivity and distance be a superpower, or is it a hindrance?
I think there are certain disciplines in it within sport now. I mean, sport is just a massive business in terms of, and it has all of your traditional. It has so many strands to it. So I think within some finance roles, in terms of people who don't like the sport, can look at things very detached from, well, what does that sort of spend there do? Is that a luxury? Is that this? Is it there? So I think some admin functions can definitely, you can be somewhat detached to it, but you develop relationships and things with people. And sport is one of the absolute ultimate people businesses. And chemistry within an office and things there. You want to see the people you work with happy, or good organizations do. So I think, look, you've got to be in it to some degree. I don't think total detachment to it can work. And I don't necessarily think you need to, I think it can not be your principal or your first love of sport or whatever else. You could be a football guy and you're working in basketball, but it's all the general dynamics of sport and understanding all of the aspects that go into the organization definitely have a big part to play in it. So there's probably only one area, but you would have to be such a big business and a big team. It's probably merchandise and licensing that you could be truly detached to it, but you probably are engaged with it at the same time, because now with merchandise, with licensing, you're speaking about the heroes, the icons, the cult figures, their stories, their quirks, their personality traits that really develop brand, that develop product. So, yeah, I don't know if you can dislike sport and be in it, but I think you can certainly. It doesn't have to be your absolute principle and whatever else, but you've got to understand that it matters to people. And I think just naturally from that, you will care.
Yeah, it really does matter. Sometimes it matters to people too much. Right, Angus, I meant to ask this about 25 minutes ago, but I got way too into our conversation about children in America and stuff. So I'm going to go back there. Will you sketch out? So we take us from playing rugby league for Scotland students, or all the way, and then the rest of your journey is in rugby, through to working in sport, through to now running a soccer club or football club in Canada. Just how does this happen? I mean, just tell
So,
us.
yeah, I think it goes back to being in a very, very good schools rugby team at 16, 17, when you trace it all the way back. I was very lucky. I went to a Campion school in Hornchurch, Essex, like on the sort of the fringes of like East London, really there. And we were the first schoolboy team, and I think still the only schoolboy team that was a state school that won the Daily Mail, the English Schools Cup. That then,
Really? Wow.
yeah, it
I
was
don't
a lot of fun. Just a great group of lads that I still have contact with. A few of them, just great people in terms of who grew up with, and that for me developed my love of sport. All boys Catholic school in East London, sport was central to it in growing up and playing it. I then went up to Scotland for university, continued to play, found a great club up there in Boroughmuir, played for Scottish universities, Union, and then through various guys, buddies, things, ended up playing Scotland Students Rugby League.
Is that
Within
an
that
easy
time,
transition to make, by the way? I mean, I don't know that much about. I know the high level differences, but is it easy to make that make
it
that
was
switch?
easy enough in terms of, for me, it was play at the time. And I did it and I played both because I really enjoyed them both. Always loved watching rugby league, and then gave it a crack, gave it a go, and enjoyed it. I then, after like my knee was in pieces pretty early, ended up taking opportunity that was presented to me with Scotland Rugby League. Coached the Scotland A team for a number of years, and from that, promoting players from the A team to the full professional side. Opportunity came within the board of Scotland Rugby League to help the leadership of it and some things commercially. Opportunity then came on the coaching side to join up with the team. And after we qualified, I basically went into camp to shadow the team for a week. And in that week, we qualified for the Rugby League World Cup. And the head coach, team manager at the time said, well, you're coming next year to Australia with us, aren't you? And I was like, yeah, fantastic. I'm all in on that.
Nice.
So 2008 Rugby League World Cup, I went to Australia. After that, I then came back and finished up was made redundant, finished up in IT and technology recruitment. And actually the kit manufacturer, the Puma licensee for UK and Ireland. I'd got to know them a little bit through the World Cup, some contacts there. Went and worked for them for a couple of years in Scotland, actually trying to launch something that is very like the North American model of kit at colleges and sort of kitting out universities in proper sort of athletic gear, Puma being the brands that we were using for that. And then from there, in terms of that giving me some commercial exposure in sport, was still doing a lot of coaching. I went to Opta, the sports data company, and sales manager down there for them in London, worked on all of their projects in rugby. We hit a real like purple patch on the sales and the commercial side because the product was great. Teams loved using it. So I started to work with every team in what was then Aviva, is now the Gallagher Premiership. All of the teams that were then in, I think it was even then Pro 12, then Pro 14, now Rugby Championship and national teams. A lot of work with the broadcasters. And the rugby business just flew. That we were really working
Angus,
with everyone.
before you said you'd work during the week, then you'd go and work with the BBC broadcasting.
Yeah.
What do you mean specifically? What were you doing with the BBC? And then you talked about giving people analysis to then go and present. What were you doing?
So what we were doing really is that I was on the sales side of it, but I sort of learned that the quickest way to work in broadcast on the sales side was get to know the on-air talent and get to know what were the questions they had. And so what we were doing in selling and showing teams what they could do with the product, we started to show the broadcasters. And so we effectively, and it's quite strange actually with the Opta business. In football, we were used by Sky Sports and the broadcaster, and then teams cottoned on. Whereas in rugby, we were used and really, really, really well adopted by the teams. So as players finished, as sort of the newer breed of broadcasters came in, they were familiar with our products and services. We then went and had a look. We had a fantastic editorial department, journalists who would take the stories out of the data and package it. And then I would just go and sit with the guys in the broadcast truck, work with the guys at a company, Austin Elliott, on the broadcast graphics and build graphics that told the story. So whether it was simple things like player head-to-heads in who makes the most meters, tackles, missed tackles, etc., piecing that together from a data standpoint as a narrative, and then being in the truck and then just getting to know the guys and just developed a level of comfort, I think, with the on-air talent, with the producers, particularly of the Six Nations for a number of years, that I was doing, 2 games a weekend on the Six Nations for maybe 2 or 3 years running there. And even when I initially moved to the States, I went back for like the first February, March to work on the Six Nations for that tournament there. But ultimately, the work at Opta had been very successful in rugby. I then started to do some work on the sponsorship and brand side in football. We did a deal with Barclays where they were building an app, and something that is so simple in sport, you need all the metadata for the fixtures, for the player stats, for the results, everything there. So we then started to open up working with brands, working with sponsors a lot more. Did a lot with Barclays, did a lot with EA Sports, number of others, Accenture in rugby, IBM, Audi. That then led to, and around that sort of same time as I'd started at Opta, I had met Angela, my now wife, at my cousin's wedding in New York. Had done the long distance thing. It's amazing the power of turning up in a kilt at a wedding in New York. You do all right. And then, so you end up doing the long distance. We'd end up doing the long distance thing. And then while all that was happening, we won a bit of business with Major League Soccer. And the work that we were doing with the Premier League, we essentially were replicating the contract with Major League Soccer, building a data center here within MLS's office on 38th and Madison. And I just latched onto that opportunity, tried to do as much as I could with a chap who's still a great friend, James Dennis, on the US side of our business. And then ultimately, just about at the same time, I had eventually convinced Opta to let me move out here and work on that side of it. We were bought by Perform Group. And so then I had to go through the process again of convincing people that I should still come out here and leave what was a very successful rugby business at the time to focus on this. Fortunately, they agreed, and then had a number of fantastic years leading that business. That would have been 2013 or so, 2012, 2013.
So you've been here. You've been here just over a decade.
Yeah, I think so now. It was a lot of fun working in the Major League Soccer business, and then that whole education process. Again, what I'd learned in rugby was just primed me for what we were doing here, going out and visiting teams in Major League Soccer just as they were starting to adopt data, analytics, research, and football being the global game it is, you're able to do a lot with that in scouting, in recruitment, in benchmark setting. So it just worked out incredibly well, and very fortunate that as I was growing in my career, I suppose MLS has just grown absolutely exponentially as well. And you look at, I think when I probably first came over here, it could be as few as 16, maybe as many as 18 teams in MLS. But we're now at the point with like St. Louis coming in this year and San Diego announced that you're going to be over 30 MLS teams in the next couple of years. And the growth of the USL at a level below that as well, and things north of the border up in Canada too. So I was just very lucky with a lot of contacts that I made. I finished with the Opta, the Perform business, just around the time Cam was born in like 2016, 2017. I've been working as an independent consultant for a while, and the path to Canada was really out of looking at the club and looking at the league as an investment opportunity for a number of investors. I got to know the owners of the club, the Baldazara family at the time, and they were looking to make a leadership change. What I thought was a short-term consulting project for a couple of months to put some things back on track, and away we go, was sort of thrown into a spin when in March, like 2020, I was on a phone call, and suddenly the guest speaker is the Canadian representative on the World Health Organization, and one of the top sort of doctors within the Olympic movement, telling us what he thinks is going to happen with COVID as a result of things in the NBA shutting down. We thought we might be quiet for 6-8 weeks, and then all kinds of chaos reigned. And I think we're only just recovering as a startup business and league in Canada on things there now. So, yeah, what was meant to be a very short engagement, a couple of years later, I'm 3 years later, 4 years later, whatever it is, I'm still there. And I've loved every minute of it.
What's it like?
It's great in terms of like I think, as I've said before, sport I love, football I love, absolutely love, and I've been so fortunate to have stumbled into it again and like reinvigorated a love that I had as a kid, really, having been played and been so involved in rugby, to get back into it and transform what I know in terms of performance, an elite performance, back into soccer, and take what I know from data analytics and work with some great people along the way. To now, it's and I can only say it in terms of the opportunity of things up in Canada. The CPL started in 2019, and
no way, is that new? And then
so it's that new. So it's like
next year.
Yeah.
Ouch.
So yeah, you've got that first year. You get through your first year. I wasn't there for the first year of this club. When you have a change after 1 year, it's obviously because something's not gone right.
Yeah.
You go in, you've got to try and fix things, and then everything goes out the window. It wasn't until July 2021, having taken over in like December 2019, really, that I saw the team play live in a stadium.
Wow.
With the pandemic and border crossing and everything else like that. So, yeah, very, very different and difficult start to it. But again, it's I do it because of the opportunity. If you look at football, it's a game 150 years or whatever in history now since the game was invented, started, whatever. The global popularity of it. So you effectively get to be pretty close to a blank sheet of paper and start a league in one of the most desirable countries to live anywhere in the world. That's a fantastic opportunity. And Canada's also a country that there are 500,000 new Canadians moving in and emigrating there every year. So you've got tremendous potential for the game up there. Combined with that, a national team that qualified for their first World Cup since 86 or whatever it was there, doing phenomenally well on the men's side. The women's side, Olympic gold medalists from Tokyo and all things there, and co-hosts to the 2026 World Cup in US, Canada and Mexico. It's a fantastic time for the sport up there. And again, it's back to that bit that you realise you're very fortunate to work in sport, and you're just a custodian of things for as long as the next people come along to try and hopefully do some good and drive things forward. But just too good an opportunity, really. And I think that's why I've loved my time up there. That's why it's so much fun. It's also why it's equally frustrating at times, but it's just been a fantastic time and opportunity to work up there.
Do you know, I was struck watching some of the Women's World Cup. It's amazing how good they are, and I don't mean that because they're women. Just before anyone starts shouting at me and coming for me, I mean because you mentioned before the we play football's 150 years old. I think in the UK it was illegal for women to play soccer until the 70s or something. I read, I might have got that wrong, but I read something staggering like that. In our parents' lifetime, somewhere in quote unquote developed world, it was illegal for women to play football. But I mean, it's only really got big, as far as I'm aware. I mean, I know it might be different in America, but in the UK in the last 10, 15 years, and they're really good. Like, they're really, really good. So I thought the dearth between the men and the women would be much bigger, given the men have been playing and practicing and all that stuff for 150 years, and women are much newer to it from that respect. But the quality of some of the quality of the football is really good.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, when you look at it, the growth of the women's game, it's just insane. I think you're looking at, and these are probably old, but you're looking at commercial revenues for women's soccer globally up 25% year over year. You've got the celebrity investment in the NWSL with Angel City and everything that's brought with Natalie Portman, Serena Williams, Naomi Osaka's involved in another club, Jennifer Garner. That's huge for things. You've got in the US a major sponsor in Ally Insurance brought the NWSL final to primetime TV, and having that on a Saturday evening and an average audience of like just under 1 million, like that's phenomenal for the game. And then you've got, I think there was something, I think it's 77, 78% of women's leagues globally have a title sponsor. So it sounds very simple, but for brands to actually put their money where their mouth is and put their name all the way over and own a competition is absolutely massive. And so that has the knock on. And I think you'll continue to see women's soccer grow at a much faster rate than men's, purely because they've been under-resourced for so long. And I think it's fantastic that and the speed and the growth of the World Cup, obviously this is an expanded tournament, to expanding the number of teams that are in it versus previous World Cups. So that is going to drive things globally. And then you're also looking at the US as a superpower and like the all-powerful, all-conquering like NWSL and the NCAA, importantly as well. And NCAA and college soccer in the US has such a massive role in the growth of the women's game, because it had serious budgets attached to it for so long, whereas others didn't. That they are now being chased around the globe. So Barcelona are selling out the Camp Nou, the new camp, in terms of with women's football. You've got Arsenal Spurs in the Women's Super League drawing like near sellout attendances. And I think post the Euros win, the England women are selling out Wembley in like 60 minutes. It's just a very different dynamic. And I think that's the key to it. It is truly different. And because it's different, it warrants its own attention, budgets, line items. And also with that comes investment opportunities in teams, in everything else. So it's just fantastic to see. And I think it's really interesting for me as I sort of sit here and I sort of like gaze forward my role and what I will continue to do in sport in North America and hopefully within soccer, because I've really grown to love it. I just think the next decade, the growth of this sport here, I genuinely think it's going to challenge some of the big five in Europe for being the epicenter of it. The Premier League's a behemoth. There's everything going on in Saudi, but I think the growth of soccer in North America, the women's game's going to have a massive role in that, but also the men's game and what's gone on over the last decade with MLS, with a World Cup coming in 2026. And that short Argentinian fella down in Miami is doing all right for it as well. His start to things has been pretty fantastic. And It's funny. I've got a buddy who actually worked with me at Opta. He then worked at a sports technology company I was consulting with in Montreal. And then I managed to hire him at York for a year as our in-house data scientist. Sam left me at York. I don't know why working for me wasn't good enough for him to go and work for a certain Mr. Beckham down in Miami. And they've obviously just won things there. And I was having a bit of fun on WhatsApp with him saying like, well, what's the club like since Messi and Busquets and Jordi Alba have arrived and everything like that? And he says it's just nuts. They've gone from being underperforming in Major League Soccer to arguably being one of the 5 biggest football clubs in the world in the space of a month.
Yeah, it is. The world's gone from not really paying any attention to everyone watching Inter Milan. It's Inter Miami. It's quite remarkable.
And he's not, and people forget, and the rest of the world, and I think that's where it's going to be really interesting. He's still not played a game in Major League Soccer. This was a different competition he's played in for the last month. Yeah, exactly. This has been the Leagues Cup, the new competition, the first year of this competition with the Mexican sides thrown into it as well. So he now has his Major League Soccer debut and the tour around the country to come as a result of playing in that competition.
Wow. What, as well, credit where credit's due, David Beckham is a force, isn't he? He really is.
Yeah, it's amazing what a decent right foot and being a half good looking lad does for you. He's done not bad. He's done not bad.
Yeah, I remember as well. I was old enough to remember all the nonsense after the '98 World Cup, and then which ended when he saved our bacon against Greece. Right? It's one of those things that I'm sure I remember where I was. And I'm not even a big football guy now, but I still remember where I was, and I always will. But he's just everything. He just keeps parlaying it into success. But real success, it's like he's a force.
But you've just nailed why I love sport so much. I remember what I was. I remember where I was. I remember what I was doing. I might remember what I was wearing. Sport has this incredible power to evoke memories, to timeline our life. Timeline our friendships, our relationships, all of these things, more so than someone couldn't tell me the address of a house or something like that I was living in 2008, but I can tell you most of the things I still remember about a World Cup stadium in like Gosford, New South Wales, from when we played like Fiji. I could tell you so many things about literally right down to like the brand of beer I had on the bus on the way home after that game and beating Fiji, in terms of 4x gold, by the way, but in terms of things there. But it's just, it has this amazing ability to be its own like timeline, its own soundtrack to our lives. And I think sport and music are unique in that.
I think you're probably right. Yeah, I think you're probably right. And you're in a good place for both of them, right? New York. Okay, just pulling this back slightly. You are on a green card?
Yes, yeah.
On a green card, but you're married to an American, as we like to say. Your children are born and bred American, but obviously they're eligible for a British passport. I don't know if they have one or not, but they're obviously eligible.
Yeah, they are. I mean, it's funny. We speak about nationality through the lens of sport. I had my dad out visiting a couple of weeks ago, and he was winding up Cam whether when we were playing in the back garden, whether when we were playing a little game, was he playing for America or was he playing for Scotland? And sort of like little things like that there. So it's it's something I'm obviously on a green card. I've not taken citizenship yet. I may well do in time. I don't see any reason why I wouldn't. I really love the States and everything it's given to me, and the opportunities it's presented me with. I think it was interesting. Obviously, I came out here on a work visa initially, managed to convince the company and ultimately the American government that I would be a benefit to them and help grow this little sector of the sports data industry as a result of taking that job. But it is interesting that once you get your green card within the States, mine obviously through marriage, the opportunities and things that may open up for you, and things there to be here, to live, to work, and everything else. And obviously very grateful for that.
Do you think you'll ever feel like an American?
I don't know. I think you can sort of get dragged along in like the tide with it in terms of around like major events and things like that. Again, it probably, the cynicism in me probably comes from sport as much as the joy and sort of getting swept along with it. I think Americans are the best marketeers in the world, and until it probably became more political than it should be. You could have an American Tiddlywinks team and it'd sell out Madison Square Garden if you marketed America and USA and the national pride and competition correctly. And I think you see that at its absolute best during the Olympics. And like the American dream success story, what's portrayed, and these narratives of people and going on to achieve are, I think, the Olympics happening every 4 years and throwing up these like overnight sensations in sports that is their airtime and their only real airtime. I think that's America at its best in a lot of ways. I don't know in terms of like with soccer, with other sports and things like that. I'm certainly very fond of the American team. I've worked with players that have been on American teams and things like that, and you always want to see them succeed. But I don't know in terms of when the moment will be that, or if the moment will come that I truly feel American and things that. And I think that's just probably some of that's wrapped up into own identity and being very proud to be Scottish and things like that. And it would probably be an acceptance that you can be dual and you can be both, and you can root for both. But I don't think I would go the other way and actively like root against America or anything like that, certainly. But I don't know if I'll ever get fully swept up with a wave and truly feel American.
Right, your kids. Are you going to? I mean, how are you going to approach that? Are you going to? Will you get British citizenship for them? Will you encourage that side of them, or will you just let that play out how it plays out?
Plays out how it plays out. I mean, it's a fantastic thing that they have, and I think like it's a bit to parent in style and whatever else. I think you just got to let your kids know that where they come from, where you're from, where granddad, where grandma was from, and things there, and that's part of their history, their heritage, and their family as much as the American side of it. But it's choices in terms of and it's options and things like that. Cam jokes and says he wants to play football for Scotland. I said by the time he's old enough, he might be better off playing for America. It might be a bit more financially advantageous by that point. But it's you just want happy, healthy kids, and like that side of it in terms of that's not probably going to be a defining factor in their personality, their persona, and who they are. If it's something they want to lean into, fine.
Yeah, definitely going to be a piece of them.
Yeah,
and it might just be that piece that they choose to the option of wearing a kilt to weddings for some of the reasons we mentioned before.
Exactly. It might be that. It might be the fact that Cam's already, like when we went back to Scotland at Christmas, he got quite fond of like fish and chips, bottle of iron brew.
Don't get me started. Don't need. It's lunchtime. I don't need that. I don't need to be reminded of fish and chips right now. That I gotta tell you, of all things I miss, chippy and pubs. I do laugh. I've got the day we start exposing my kids to Bolton. I mean, look, Edinburgh's one thing. Edinburgh's a wonderful city, and there's nothing. I'm not slating Bolton here, but it's going to be quite. It's going to be interesting to take my kids to the UK and introduce them to Bolton. I'm looking forward to that day.
Yeah, but there are all those things, like in terms of it's going to be up to your kids to decide who they are, what they are as they grow up. That's fine. But like, I'm not going to shy away from the fact that, like, look, there's a day in the future that I can't wait to take my boys, like, individually and then together, probably for the younger one, for a pint in a British pub at 18.
Right.
There's going to be all of these things, like the difference in watching soccer in, like, watching football in a Scottish and SPL stadium and stand versus, like, the very sanitized, like, American sort of stadiums and customer service and things like that at its heart versus a little hut that gives you tea and a pie. It's just going to be very different. And, like, it's not better, it's not worse. It's just its own unique situation. I think that's so much of things. There are so many things that are better that I enjoy more about life here. When you look at it very rationally, there are also things that I should enjoy very rationally because the level of comfort, this, that, the other is better. But they're just never going to be, again, because there are these things that punctuate and soundtrack or timeline your life that have very evocative memories and things like that. And I think it's... I was chatting to someone about it not that long ago, about growing up and having kids and whatever else. And what you just really want to do is just fill this, like, box of as many memories and as diverse as possible that have their own space and their own moments, and they're not about competing with each other. And I sort of see the Scottish, the British, the sort of bit of me there as, like, just other things that are just, like, filling up the treasure chest, filling up the memory bank of different experiences and things. Not better, not worse, just different to what I experience now. And I hope that's the same for my kids. There's just lots of different and diverse experiences for them.
Well, it sounds like your kids are going to have a lot of fun. I always try and hold on. It's slightly different, but I always try and hold on to a stat that I learned recently that by the time your kids are 12, 75% of the time you'll spend with them is gone. By the time they're 12, my kid's 4, so I'm a third of the way through that. And by the time they're 18, 90% of the time you will ever spend with them is behind you. And I try and hold on to that and make sure I fill that treasure box with memories now while we can. I went to my first Yankees game recently, and it was great fun. Right, it was a Sunday. It was so much fun. Full of families, real party vibe, loved it. But I text my wife halfway through saying it's wild. There's, at any one time, 50% of the people in the stands watching the game and 50% of the people are behind the stands eating and drinking to like the biggest can of beer I've ever seen in my life, which is great. But the record. But there's so many concessions in the stands, and they're full to the brim always.
Yeah. It's very different. Like, it's very, very different.
You're not getting a £3 pie. You're spending $30 on, a lot more food.
There's that. I mean, some clubs have that great in the US. I'm very fortunate to do some things very early and help Atlanta United recruit some of their staff and things there. And what Arthur Blank's done at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in making sure that there's always something affordable on menus for people once they're in there, with like soda's $1, water's $1. Most games, hot dogs are like $2 or something like that.
It's not like my experience at the Yankees.
Very different in New York. Very different in New York, and things there. I mean, it just is. But, like, no, there are some clubs that actually, even introducing these things, they've seen an uplift in revenue.
Oh wow! Good. Good.
Because there's more. It's an interesting bit in the sports industry, concessions and concession pricing and where all that sits. But, like, it's very different. I mean, the some of the suites that you go to in stadiums around America are more like first-class airport lounges than they are sports venues. It's very different.
Yeah, interesting. Right, so you touched on this marketing before. So this is a podcast about America and being a British expat in America, and you mentioned marketing, and Americans are fantastic marketers. So let me wrap up by asking you a question about the American dream. It means different things to different people. Gets some people quite upset and exercised occasionally. But what does the American dream mean to you?
I think I probably always look at it a little step back, and I think the American dream has always been that there's a sense of fairness and that everyone's got a shot to have a go at things. And I think that's what's meant by it. I think it's the whole land of opportunity piece is what I see. And I think, look, for me, that rings very true because I get to work in sport, something that I love, in the biggest commercial playground in the world for that. So be it soccer and things primarily, but sport and sports sponsorship and the investment and the dollars in sport are bigger in the US than anywhere. And I think the American dream is a little bit that. It's big, it's brash, it's testing yourself in that weird sort of, it's testing yourself domestically, but testing yourself domestically here is the world's biggest stage. So that's where it's different for me now, and maybe it is I'm becoming American because I say domestically and it is America, but the American dream is that you can forge your own way. You can really carve out a path for you and have your own place within this country that allows you to be you. And hopefully that means a lot of success as well.
I mean, do you think it is a thing though, or do you think it is just a marketing line that's got way out of control?
I think it's a thing, and I think the danger of it, without getting too political, is that I think the American dream, it has been politicized, and has been weaponized to a degree, in that for the American dream to be true, certain people are alluding to the fact that others in society have taken it from you. And I think it goes back to that thing on effort, in terms of like, there are a lot of people who are here and expect and turning up's enough. And it's not the effort into the success stories this country's produced and the effort people have sort of that put in to succeed is often overlooked and minimized, and all of that, the effort, the struggle, everything else. I think that's probably the sad thing for me right now, is that, and I think you'll see it a lot more over the next 12, 18 months as you go into serious election year and things, there is that the American dream and the promise of it will be weaponized and used at the expense of others. And I think that's quite sad, because it's the absolute opposite of what it is to me.
I could not agree with you more. That's a great answer. I think we're going to leave it there. So, on that note, where can people find you, Angus, if they want to check in with you?
I'd probably say on LinkedIn, if you find me, Angus Mcnab, or on Twitter or X, as Elon would rather have us call it now. I'm at Gus Mcnab, GUSMCNAB.
Super. Great. Well, this has been a great conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much for being on Always an Expat.
Thanks very much, Rich.
Cheers.